The Nerdcast Empire is on the air. It is another episode of Music Weekly here on the Nerdcast Empire. I am Matt in the studio. Great to have you along with us for another edition of our weekly music show. And this is week number 19 that we have done this here on the Nerdcast Empire. And we are going to be taking a look at the music from June the 7th this week. We're also going to be talking some music news and notes, and we'll be going into the vault as well as we do each and every week. Great to have you along with us once again live on Twitch, or if you're catching us on the VOD, whether it's the VOD on Twitch or on YouTube or potentially on your favorite podcast source, we will be joining you at all of those locations. Joining me in studio as he does each and every week is Mike. Mike, how's it going?
It's going all right here. Definitely a different week than last week, but, you know, there was still enough good music out there to throw together some recommendations, and all in all, not a bad week.
Yeah, we definitely had a larger sample of good music to choose from last week, but the stuff we have for you this week, I think people will really enjoy. We'll be getting to that coming up in just a few minutes, so make sure you stick around for that. But before we do that, we want to get to some music news as we do at the top of each of these shows. We're going to start off with a couple of stories from Metal Injection. One that I think could end up maybe drawing a little more discussion. It was a story that was released 3 days ago. Joel Barrios posting the story from the Universal Music Group, partnering with an AI startup, Sound Labs, to create a high-fidelity vocal model for artists to be able to use their own voice for training but have control and ownership over the voice. The software is called Mic Drop. It basically uses machine learning to mimic an artist's voice. In the article, it basically says you can use it in many ways, including to sing in languages you don't know, or to possibly continue making music when an artist's vocal cords, are affected by sickness, and may even be able to use this to release music after an artist has passed away. AI is certainly an interesting topic, and it comes up quite a bit on this podcast, and obviously everywhere in life as it continues to grow almost by leaps and bounds every day, and new technology is something that I think everybody's still trying to get a handle on what AI is going to look like in the future. So I think, as with any discussions on AI, I think there's going to be a lot of twists and turns on this road before we kind of get to where we're going. But initial thoughts, Mike, as you read that story as Chris has joined us in the chat from Parts Unknown, trying to figure out how magnets work. And once you figure that out, please let us know. But
how exactly is a rainbow made?
But your initial thoughts when you listen or you look at that story, and I'll post the link to the story in the chat while you talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, it's really kind of fascinating in a way, just seeing how AI can affect multiple industries, because I think anyone who has a job has been touched by it in some way, shape, or form. So it's certainly not surprising to see it hitting different areas within entertainment as well. A couple of things that I did think were interesting is that, you know, they can use it basically to create audio tracks of the singer singing in languages that they don't speak. I think that's, you know, is it still fake? Absolutely, but I can see the utility there. And you know, if you have a short-term issue where your singer can't sing due to vocal cord issues, you can leverage it to keep going in that instance as well. I would imagine they're using it probably already to artificially clean up live vocals whenever they're recording live tracks for release later. I like with anything, it's great until it isn't, and it'll be interesting to see just kind of how pervasive it becomes to the point where you're kind of in a situation as a fan where you're looking for artists who aren't using it in any way, shape, or form.
And something we talked about off the air, but it's worth discussing on the air. This technology they're using is new, but the idea of using computer technology to affect vocals obviously is not new. Everybody's familiar with Auto-Tune. It was software that was introduced in 1997 and really became very popular, almost like when the synthesizers came around in the early 80s or late 70s. Everybody used it because it was this new toy, basically. And even cites in the Wikipedia article, Share a Song, Believe, because that's one of those ones you think of almost immediately when you think of Auto-Tune to a fault. But, I mean, clearly that's an extreme example, but that's one, if you've heard the song, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But that was kind of the early stages of voice manipulation using just computer software. Obviously, you had things like the voice box or the talk box that Bon Jovi used. So, I mean, you've had other examples of that, a little more rudimentary technology, but now you're getting into this where you can basically create this stuff from scratch. And I was telling you, I've seen stories where some of this video conferencing software not only allows you to do this sort of thing where you can speak in other languages, but they'll actually use AI to make the lip flaps match the foreign words so that it looks like you're legitimately speaking that foreign language. AI's coming. Like, whether you like it or don't like it, or you like some of it but not all of it, there's no question that this train's rolling down the tracks right now without any kind of brakes. Like, there's very little in the way of guardrails. At some point, somebody's going to have to put some guardrails up on it for sure. And I think you could end up with a situation here, kind of like the John Fogerty situation, where he was sued for sounding so much like himself when he went into his solo career after Creedence Clearwater Revival. That case could end up being the precedent for bands basically taking other lead singers and using their AI voice pattern to sing for their band. It's going to be a very interesting future as far as this technology as it continues to roll out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it may solve a lot of the issues of lead singers who can no longer do their job, or perhaps singers who can't get along with their bands and end up parting ways with them. Like, well, we don't really need the original singer if we have the robot voice of the original singer. We can pay him nothing, and he doesn't argue, and he sounds perfect. Again, since we kind of tend to look at some of the lesser-known artists on our show, I kind of feel good in knowing that chances are a lot of them are not making use of this technology.
Chris asking if we can get this software in Vince Neil's hands. Maybe, perhaps.
Well, you kind of wonder now, like over Saints of Los Angeles, and maybe even before that, how much of Vince Neil was really doing the singing himself, and what kind of work were they doing to make his voice sound good in the studio? And
you wonder, again, kind of looking at that CCR case as a potential precedent, because obviously Fogerty, I think CCR did succeed in that lawsuit to some degree. I think there were some of the songs or whatever that he wasn't allowed to do, or something along that route. You just wonder, like, and we talked about it earlier, but take a band like Skid Row, for example, that clearly, for whatever reason, is not getting back together with Sebastian Bach. But let's say they decide they want AI Sebastian Bach to come back so they can record some new music or to sing the old music in concert.
Yeah.
Does Sebastian Bach have legal grounds? Like, who owns the voice of Sebastian Bach when he was singing for Skid Row? I think is going to be the legal case that you're going to see come up, because I'm sure Skid Row would argue, well, that's Skid Row. That's their sound. It's an instrument in Skid Row, whereas the singer's going to say, no, that's my voice.
But clearly that was never written into a contract in 1989 to cover such instances.
Correct.
So there's clearly going to be precedent set somewhere down the road. It'll be interesting to see when that happens.
And we're talking about, obviously, things that almost certainly will come up. But I think where you start getting a little queasy about the whole thing is the idea of bands releasing music after the death of a lead singer.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're in a stage, and I think we've even talked about it in this podcast, when you start looking at maybe some of those early rock bands from the 50s and 60s, some of those bands are still existing, in many cases with no original members. They're almost just a tribute act, but they still tour under the band's name at this point. So the question then becomes, if you have a band from the 50s or 60s, or an act, I mean, I mentioned Marty Robbins earlier, like, where does it draw the line? Because on the one hand, if you own the estate of Marty Robbins and you say, well, we could make money off of this, and the estate, the family owns the rights to his records, and they say, well, we were okay with it, let's go ahead and do it. That's one thing, but at the same time, like, do you really feel good about that? And Rachel pointing out that the Beatles had a new song very much similarly released that way recently. Like, I don't know how I feel about that, because on the one hand, like, if the estate or the band or the family is okay with it, at least they're not doing it against the will of the family. But at the same time, like, it just kind of feels gross in some regard as well. Very inauthentic that we're just, I don't know. I don't know that it does tribute to the person who had passed away, but I'm curious what you think of that.
Yeah, I mean, as a fan, I don't know how interested I would be in that kind of product, knowing that it beyond just audio samples essentially used to model this person's voice, they're not creatively involved. They're not creating this product at all. They're fully removed from it. That being said, if I was the singer in that situation and I knew that my voice could allow my family to continue cashing in, I think I'd be totally for it.
And I think that you'll see cases where, with that in mind, some of these modern artists may put something in their will that says, look, if technology allows for a 3D hologram of me with my voice to write new music and tour into forever, and it helps my family, like, yeah, I'm totally okay with that. I think where you get into the grossness is when it's somebody who's long since passed away, and there's really no way to know what they would have felt about that, or just again, it's kind of a runaway train at this point, and really, music is the scenarios we could come up with are really as wild as your imagination could get. Chris pointing out people buying the catalogs, which we just saw. I mean, was it
definitely makes Queen's back catalog even more worth it?
Yeah, I mean, Sony Music, I think it was, just purchased it for over $1 billion. And again, now you start looking at that and like, well, if we get new Queen albums beyond, if that back catalog then includes the future AI rights to more Queen music, you're right. I mean, now where we were talking about that a couple weeks ago, where it's like, I don't know how you can monetarily make that work. Now you start thinking, well, maybe they can. Maybe they just release new albums that are all AI somewhere down the road, and people will keep buying them because they love the sound. And now you've made your billion whatever dollars back for buying it.
I can't wait, because I think they're rebooting the Highlander movie series, so this would be the perfect time to dig up Freddie Mercury, essentially, and have Queen supply the soundtrack, and it's bound to be better than them having to rely on like random American Idol winners for their vocals.
And it also makes you wonder, and this is kind of another thought, and then we'll get to our second news story, but let's take a band like Journey, for example, who, of course, moved on from Steve Perry, and they, of course, went to Steve Algeri, and then they moved on to Arnel Pineda. Instead of doing that in the future, you just get AI Steve Perry to sing your new songs. You don't even have to hire a new lead singer. Or if you have a band where the lead singer is just a butt and you just don't want to deal with them anymore, you just have AI come in. And again, you're going to see a lot of interesting artist contracts, because you're going to, artists who may have signed their rights away. Now you're going to see, well, is that going to hold up for AI? Right? Like, there's a whole mess that's going to come out of all of this.
It's sad in a way for any tribute band performers or karaoke aficionados that dream of maybe becoming the sound-alike lead singer of your favorite arena rock band just goes out the window, because they can now have a robot take over.
That's 100% right. So we'll see. I mean, we'll certainly keep an eye on those kind of stories. They are fascinating. Sometimes they're borderline depressing, depending on kind of how you look at it. But we'll definitely keep an eye on those kind of stories and discuss it from time to time, because it does make for a fascinating discussion. One other quick story we want to get to before we get to our new music is the news that Yngwie Malmsteen has announced a 40th anniversary U.S. tour happening between September and November this year. Again, from Metal Injection, posting the information about it, starting in Fort Myers on September the 26th and going all the way till November the 28th in New York City at the Gramercy Theater. Of note in this area, some local dates include the Madison Theater in Covington on November the 7th. He's going to be in Lorraine at the Lorraine Place on November the 8th, and the King of Clubs in Columbus, Ohio on November the 9th, also coming to Ashland, Kentucky, and really pretty much coast to coast. I mean, it's not every city, but pretty much hitting most of the country with this tour, and basically playing almost every day for 2 months. Obviously, Yngwie Malmsteen is a legend. It'll be really interesting to see kind of what his set list look like for this. But as someone who's never seen him but has really appreciated his music, this would be a great show to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you, I'm curious to see, one, how long the set list is, and two, just what kind of variety over 40 years you're going to see on that set list. Definitely looking forward to checking out either the Covington or the Columbus shows for sure.
I guess the good thing for us is the shows that are coming up that we would go see are going to be later in the tour, so we will get a chance to kind of see what kind of set list he's putting together and how much variety is it the same show every night. Or, I mean, with that guy and his catalog, I mean, he could almost do a different concert every night for a couple weeks and start rotating. But virtuoso, obviously, really cool that he's coming for this 40th anniversary tour, and really interested in checking some of it out if possible. Yeah. So that's just a little music news that we'll lead off the program with. Now we're going to get to what we typically focus on in this podcast, which is our new music. And, of course, each and every week, Mike puts together a playlist, which he will be pasting at some point into our chat, that will have the music of June the 7th, in this case, on this playlist. And it includes pretty much a lot of the rock and metal releases that are out there. He'll post a song from each one that he can find. Unfortunately, there was one this week, and I'll let you mention them at the top of your list that you probably would have chosen, but unfortunately, we couldn't find their album on the streaming sites. Did find a track to review, but without having to be able to kind of direct people to the whole album, we kind of hesitate to pick those bands. But a lot of good music this week. Again, maybe not the volume that we had last week, but I think the four bands we've chosen have all really put out really great releases, and we encourage you, as always, support the artists. Make sure you buy the music, buy the merch. If they're going to be touring in your area, go see them, because that's what keeps this music alive. And we certainly hope people will continue to support acts like this so they continue to make new music. So before you get to your two picks, if you can, talk a little bit about that one band, because I mean the one track they had was outstanding. We don't have to get too far into detail, but just some thoughts on that song that we heard off of their new album.
Yeah, it's kind of wild. The band in question that I really wanted to include, but I'll have to buy their album apparently before I can really get to sink my teeth into the whole thing. The band is named Factory of Art. They are a progressive power metal band from Germany, and they just, we hear a lot of progressive power metal bands, but this band just really kind of had a distinct sound about them. Kind of the song starts off really kind of over the top, like epic symphonic kind of druidic thing going on, and then you have the lead singer who can both sing really well and growl really well, and he kind of blends the two together at a really good ratio to where it's not too much of either one. But I was really into that one song, and then unfortunately was not able to locate the rest of that album. The song in question, you can find it on YouTube, is Blessing in Disguise. It's definitely worth checking out, but I definitely want to hear more of these guys.
Yeah, I was really blown away. I thought it was really good. It was definitely on my list to check out, but as Mike...
For such a generic name as Factory of Art.
Yes.
Like that's right up there with like Metal De Facto from like a few months back.
Yeah.
Just like that's your name? Really? Okay.
I can only appreciate it in the fact that, when you're looking to name podcasts and stuff, man, it feels like everyone has been done already. So it's like, if you're coming up with something new, like, good luck trying to come up with something that 18 people haven't chosen already. So,
and you got to assume a German Factory of Art would be just very efficient.
Yes.
And run very well. So I guess I can kind of understand that.
Their sound is very efficient. I hope at some point we can maybe spotlight the album if it ever pops up. But definitely check that out. But we do have 4 bands whose albums were available, which made it easier for us to pick them. Mike, you've got 2 choices as always, so tell us what your first pick for this week is.
Yeah, so my first pick is a band that originated back in 1995, kind of vanished in 2003, only to come back in 2020. Their website lists their influences: Ronnie James Dio, Judas Priest, Seven Dust, David Coverdale, Disturbed, and Five Finger Death Punch. They are a New York-based heavy metal band. This is their 7th album. The band is Holy Mother, and the album is called Rise.
That's a wild list of influences there. That is taking the whole trip around the sun there. But when you listen to the song, I got to listen to about half of their album before the show. I mean, you can definitely hear there's a variety in their sound that comes from those different influences.
Yeah, to me, I could definitely hear some of the older influences in Mike Torelli's voice. Like, he has a very Dio-esque vocal delivery, which has drawn a lot of comparisons. Kind of a somber but interesting note. He actually suffered from stage 3 stomach cancer in the mid 2000s, which is the same thing that ultimately killed Ronnie James Dio. Thankfully, he was able to recover from this and get back going with his career. But it's just kind of an odd comparison between the two.
Yeah, that's definitely not how you want to be compared to Ronnie James Dio, for sure.
Thankfully, he also has the voice to fall back on, because that's definitely odd. But other interesting notes on the band: the drummer James Harris, who's the songwriting partner of Torelli, and they've been together since the early days of the band, also played drums for Chris Angel early in his career. Which I've never actually watched a Chris Angel performance. I didn't know he had a drummer, to be totally honest.
I guess I shouldn't be shocked. He feels like metal magic, basically. So
Yeah.
why would he not have a band playing behind him?
The guitarist Mickey Licks, they kind of see him as like their guitar hero, just that kind of classic virtuoso player. He's been all over the world, including festivals like Wacken Open Air, so he's kind of a big deal. And the bassist Wayne Banks, he was actually a member of Robin Gibb's band for over 10 years prior to his stint with this band. But yeah, he's toured with Saxon, shared the stage with Joe Lynn Turner as well. So this guy's definitely been around the block too.
Their band has as varied a path as their influences are.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think musically they do kind of have more of a modern sound to them. You can definitely hear a bit of the Seven Dust and Disturbed there. Not so sure about Five Finger Death Punch, but, whatever works. That being said, the standout tracks from the album, we have Fire, The Elevator, Jeremiah, Rise, and Interventionist. Another one of the standout songs being Power, which is what I've picked out to be played today.
And a reminder, as I get ready to mute our podcast version of this, is that if you want to hear the music clips, you got to check us out for sure live. That is the guaranteed place you'll get to hear the music clips. Assuming they're not muted, you'll also get to hear them on the VOD. You'll get to hear them on the YouTube VOD. If you're listening where you listen to your podcast, you won't get the music clips there, so make sure you check us out, specifically on Twitch, and follow us on Twitch while you're there as we continue to try our push to get to 50 followers. With that sales pitch given, it's time to check out the song Power from Holy Mother. The album is called Rise. Let us check this out now. Yeah, great stuff there, and it's funny. I remind me a little Dave Mustaine there, and that little almost spoken word part that kind of snuck in there. But no, I really enjoyed what I've gotten to listen to of this album so far. Again, there is a lot of variety in it, but in the end, it's just great modern heavy metal and great vocals, great music. The mix feels very balanced. Nothing seems to overpower anything else, which is important, I think, to me when I'm listening for metal music. And they're a group I definitely want to get a chance to listen to the rest of this album. Again, Holy Mother. The album is Rise. Really great stuff. That was the song we heard was Power, but definitely check out the whole album. Really great stuff and a great first pick for this week. Let's take a look at your second pick for this week, Mike.
Yeah, for my second pick, I feel like we talk about pretty regularly bands who have been around a really long time that we've just never stumbled into, and this is definitely the case with this next band. They originally started back in 1979, kind of a part of the new wave of British heavy metal. That being said, they weren't British, but still European metal scene for sure. They ran until 1988. Kind of sounded like some lineup changes and a shift toward an AOR style kind of led to dissension within the band and ultimately their dissolution. They came back in 1999. Yves Campion, the bassist of the band, along with Joe Amore, he was originally the drummer, took over as singer with his brother stepping in on drums. They ran that way until about 2015 when the Amore brothers issued a statement saying they were going to leave the band and no longer want to collaborate with Campion. I didn't see what led to that. I'm guessing probably just more creative differences based on what little information I found. That being said, this is the 12th studio album from the French power metal band. The band is Nightmare, and the album is called Encrypted.
Yes, this group is the French power metal group, not the Japanese Visual K group that Google wanted to send me to when I was looking up their information. I'm not sure why. The Google seems to get worse day in and day out, but yeah, I really enjoyed this. This is really good, and again, I've listened to about half of this before today's podcast, and again, they've got a really great sound.
Great sound. A lot of band members kind of filtering in and out of this group. This is the first album with their new vocalist, Barbara Magore. Without having listened to their prior albums, obviously, because I've just now stumbled into this band, I think she certainly delivers on this album. She has both a clean and more of a growling voice, and I think she does both perfectly fine. It's interesting. So often I feel like with any band that labels themselves power metal, once they get that female lead singer, they tend to veer more toward like the symphonic side of metal. I didn't feel that way with this band. This just feels like modern power metal, more heavy than symphonic, which to me is always a nice change of pace. Definitely something you'll hear on the sample, but standout tracks for the album are Nexus and Ferris, Voices from the Other Side, Saviors of the Damned, Encrypted, Incandescent. The track I picked out to demo is Nexus and Ferris.
Yeah, I think anytime you get a band the female-fronted bands, like you said, if they're going to go the symphonic route, you got to be careful because I feel like sometimes it can get too over the top or too...
It's so saturated, too.
There's a ton of it out there. We hear of it every week. So when I heard this, it was definitely the vocals really cut through, and I think that's when you get something that's really special. So we are going to check out a little bit of the opening track of Nightmare's new album, Encrypted. It is Nexus and Ferris. Let's check that out now.
Never was in hell before. Ever saw behind my door. I am in the eye of the storm. Am I a saint? Am I a sinner? As the reaper is calling my name. Am I a saint? Am I the weaker? Do I have some loss to blame? I realize.
I wanted to leave in a little bit of the instrumental there at the end, just to you get to hear the double kicks and the bass
Yeah.
drums really going to town
Definitely
there.
brings the heaviness.
Yeah, for sure. But again, I think the melodies of the chorus work really well with the guitars and the song to kind of make it all go together. Neither one stands out, but it kind of comes together in a great way where the whole thing feels like this big force of energy coming at you, just adding to the power of the chorus. And then again, the instrumental part there at the end, just really strong as well. This is another case where I didn't get a chance to listen to the whole album, but what I've heard really stands out. Looking forward to hearing more of it. So that was Nightmare with Encrypted. Definitely check them out. Really, really good stuff. I had 2 picks this week as well, so we will start off with the first pick of mine, and we are going to be starting off with a band, as you just had a band that has been around for a while, and I will now be picking a band that has been around for a while as well. This is a group that is out of Gothenburg, Sweden. This is their 14th studio album. The group is called Evergrey with the album Theories of Emptiness. They were originally formed in 1993 in Gothenburg by Thomas England as a progressive power metal band. At the time, it was kind of noted in Wikipedia that melodic death metal was huge in Gothenburg. So,
That the Gothenburg sound is like synonymous with melodic death metal.
So it's definitely a contrast, certainly, that this progressive power metal band was coming out of there. They're also a band that has kind of gone through some members over the years. Up until just a few weeks ago, they had kind of found a lineup that had been together for, I think most of them been there at least 14 years, some of them longer. But on May 15th, it was announced that their drummer, Jonas Ekdahl, would be stepping down because he wants to get more into the production side of music. So Simon Sandness has joined them as drummer for the corresponding tour for this album. But just really great stuff from these guys. Again, they've been around forever, but they're continuing to produce great music, which is what you love to see. The standout tracks on this one, Misfortune, Falling from the Sun. The track we're going to play a little bit of is called Say. But overall, I thought it was great. Start to finish, really good stuff, and looking forward to letting people hear a little bit of that. So we're going to do that at this time. We're going to play a little bit of Say from Evergrey, Theories of Emptiness. So we'll check that out now.
It's like you painted a picture without colors and inert. You spoke without phases, and I still hope to be heard. Say what you want, say how you see this. Say it from my heart is making me read this. Say what you want, just say how you want me. Say before I'm getting used to this hurting.
Just really enjoyed it. Great vocals, great music to go with it. And again, they've been doing it for a long time, and it's great to see them continue to put out good music. Mike, your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, this was definitely one of my favorite releases from the week. I noticed on their Bandcamp when I was doing my research originally that they referred to themselves as dark metal among their tags, and I think that's a perfect way to describe it. Kind of going back to the whole Gothenburg thing, you had bands that were really big in melodic death metal back then. At the Gates, Dark Tranquillity, In Flames kind of pioneered that sound, which isn't surprising. Sweden's constantly known for melody, so it was no surprise that when they do death metal, there's also still a certain melody being retained there. But their music has that quality, but without the vocals. It's got that cleaner vocal, which I prefer anyway. So yeah, I definitely like this.
And we've picked a lot of bands from Sweden over the weeks during this podcast, so they're just continuing to churn out great music, and you feel like Evergrey was probably a band that influenced a lot of these other bands that we've chosen each and every week. So definitely check that out, Evergrey, Theories of Emptiness. Really enjoyed that one. I think you'll really enjoy it too. We're coming back to the U.S. for my final pick of the week, and this is a group that is a relatively new group based out of Sacramento, California. The band is Red Voodoo, and the EP in this case is also Red Voodoo. They've been around since 2019. Frontman Dino McCord, lead guitarist Davin Loyler, bassist Andrew Edwards, and drummer Andy Nathan make up this group. They're a young group. Of course, most people will hear the name Red Voodoo and immediately think of Sammy Hagar, as you should. The band was named after the Hagar album, which was released in 1999. It should be noted that the oldest member of the band was born 2 years after the Hagar album was released. So this is a young band performing very classic metal music that would very much fit in the era where Hagar was probably at his height. So I think it kind of works out well. They worked with famous producer Jameson Durr, who of course has produced everybody from Don Henley to Tesla to Hagar himself, Nancy Wilson, to put out this EP. And you can certainly hear it's very polished, really beginning to end. They've already been opening for some of these bands, including Hagar, Y&T, Everclear. So they're getting on the bill of some of these big groups already, which is great to see. And I think this could be the beginning of something really big for these guys. So kind of excited to see where they go from here. It's a 5-track EP, so really the whole album is worth a listen. It's only 18 minutes long, certainly worth your time, so definitely encourage you to check it out. We're going to be checking out the track Hourglass from this EP. It's the second track of the 5-track EP. Again, this is Red Voodoo with the Red Voodoo EP, so definitely check that out, and we're going to check out a little bit of that now if I get everything back where it needs to be. So let me do that real quick, and we'll check out Hourglass.
And I'm running in, out of time. And I'm losing my mind. Hourglass, taking away every day. It's an hourglass, and I'm feeling the pain built it up in me. Say you love me when it not.
Yeah, they've just got a really classic rock sound for a bunch of guys that are either in their late teens or early 20s. That's a really encouraging sign. Again, the first thing we've discovered on this podcast is this kind of music still being made, and to find out it's being made by the new generation of music is even more encouraging. Mike, your thoughts on Red Voodoo?
Yeah, it's always cool to hear a new band, especially one that's actually young musicians that seem to just want to rock. I feel like there's such a void of that in music nowadays. If not a void, it's just been so de-emphasized, you never encounter it. Obviously, we get to hear more than the majority of the people because we seek it out. But you hear a band playing it like this, and it somehow feels fresh, even though it's something calling back to decades prior. But I don't know. There's a certain timelessness about the sound that you're glad that it's around.
Absolutely. I'm really excited to hear these guys continue to grow as artists. Obviously, this is their first EP, so really interested to see where they go from here. And we'll certainly be keeping an eye on Red Voodoo, but really like what I heard. Hopefully they'll tour maybe somewhere in this area. I'd love to see these guys live and encourage them to continue putting out great music. But again, if you like any of the music you heard, make sure you support these bands. Buy their albums. Support them by buying tickets when you get to see them live. There's nothing like live music, but that's what's going to allow them to continue to make this awesome music that we brought you this week. If you're, oh yeah, go ahead.
The other thing about that, I think it's so huge to see some of the bands they've toured with, because these are older bands that say, hey, we need these young guys out here and get them out to a bigger audience and hopefully more notoriety. It's to think they've opened for Sammy Hagar, Y&T, Everclear, played with Slaughter. The Monsters of Rock cruise brought them out on tour, on the cruise. So they got to share a stage with Alice Cooper and Buck Cherry also.
Wow.
Just different generations of rock music that these guys are getting exposed to. To your point, people need to go out there and support that.
If this is what you like, and I think if people that listen to this podcast probably generally like this type of music, otherwise maybe you just enjoy to hear us bantering every week. I don't know. There could be another reason why you like this podcast. But if you like this, these are the kind of bands we have to support. We have to show these guys, like, hey, like, we love what you're doing too. We love this same music, and we want to see more people that age continue to put out this type of music, because it doesn't have to die and go away. Like, it can continue to be there, and it is a callback to past decades while also sounding fresh. Like you said, it's not just a rip-off of old sounds. It's new sounds that pay homage to a great era in music. So really excited to see what these guys do. Just getting off the ground just a couple years ago. So we'll keep an eye on what they're going to do going forward. If you're listening on the podcast version of this, we're going to step aside for a break. We come back, we're going to go into the vault, where Mike and I will bring you a classic album that you need to check out. We'll do that on the other side of this time out here on the Nerdcast Empire. Back on the Nerdcast Empire, live on Twitch, as we are each and every Sunday night. Don't forget to check out our website, nerdcastempire.com. You can check out our store while you're there. A big thing we're continuing to push, please go to our Twitch page, which is twitch.tv/nerdcastempire. If you're listening live or on the Twitch VOD, you already know where it is because you're here. please drop us a follow. We're trying to push to get to 50 followers. That's when we're allowed to monetize our channel. So we've met all the other requirements. We just need to get to that 50 mark. So please tell a buddy, tell a friend, buy, sell, trade. Don't you dare miss it. Make sure you come in. Follow our account. Again, it costs nothing to follow it, but we would really appreciate the support. We'll be back with you Thursday night, 7 o'clock Eastern Time on the East Coast of the U.S. We will be bringing you another episode of Anime Thursdays. We're going to be talking about the upcoming anime season. The spring season is wrapping up. The summer season is right around the corner. Mike and I will pick out a handful of shows you need to check out. We'll also talk upcoming anime news as well. That'll be coming up Thursday night. And then 1 week from tonight, we'll be back with another episode of Music Weekly. The music of June the 14th will be on the docket, and the early look at it looks like there's some promising potential artists for next week. So we will be back with you in 1 week's time to talk more music on Music Weekly. Then coming up into July, we've got a busy weekend. We will probably, I would say almost certainly, not have a Thursday episode the week of July 4th because the 4th is on a Thursday. However, we will more than make up for it with at least one extra podcast over that weekend with the WWE Premium Live events coming up from Toronto that weekend. We'll keep you updated on what the schedule looks like for that. Let's get to the vault, where we will talk about some classic albums. And Mike, you are continuing your path through the alphabet, and you've had some really good stuff for us. We are continuing on to the letter R already, believe it or not. We're getting close to the end. What do you have for us this week from the vault?
Yeah, we are getting there. R is definitely a little more of a stacked letter than the last couple of weeks. Q and O and P were maybe a little lighter. That being said, a lot of the bands and albums that I've selected this run through of the alphabet have kind of been artists that I found back in years ago when I was searching for music online and downloading a lot through IRC. So they were bands that I'd never heard of at the time, and this is definitely no exception to that. This is the fourth full-length album from the German melodic power metal band Rough Silk, and this is their 1997 album Mephisto.
Turns out that when you look up their band on Wikipedia, it gives you the German page first, as it does appear that that is the only language they have a Wikipedia page in, which is kind of sad because these guys, they're really good.
Yeah, and that was kind of one of the themes that I was thinking of when I was writing this up, was like, of all the bands I was discovering around that same time in the early 2000s, a lot of them, when I looked up information on them, even back then, there was a lot of info out there. This band wasn't really one of them. It was very tough to dig up a lot of details on them. That being said, it's gotten a little better by 2024, but you know, the other bands I was getting into at the time, Halloween, Iced Earth, Blind Guardian, Ed Guy, Sonata Arctica, they seem to be pretty notable, and this band more or less flew under the radar. But anyway, with all that being said, this was the last album to feature Jan Barnett on vocals. He was then replaced by Thomas Lodolfi for the following two albums. I don't know how to pronounce that, but I'm doing my best. This was my favorite album of theirs, and I think that shifting vocalist had a lot to do with that. I did enjoy their next two, but kind of after that, things fell off the rails to a degree, where they had kind of vocalists by committee. But this guy, to me, his vocals, they aren't necessarily what make the album, but they're definitely a great piece on the album. The band itself was founded by Ferdy Dornberg, keyboardist and guitarist and vocalist as well in his own right. He's kind of the star of it. His music credits over the years are plentiful. On top of the Rough Silk work, he's been the keyboardist for Axel Rudy Pell since 1998. He's contributed to works by Roland Grappo, The Sweet, Accept, Halloween, Avantasia. Guy's definitely been prolific in the music industry. So, it wasn't like this was just some random band that appeared out of nowhere. This band just felt different than some of those other bands at the time. Just had a different guitar tone to them. The vocalist had a really kind of theatrical sounding voice, which was noticeable right at the beginning on the first track, Mystery Bay. Standout tracks on this album include Recall, Mephisto, My Last Farewell, Glissando, Far From Home. The whole album is phenomenal, but those are some of the more standout tracks. Separate from this album, I don't know exactly when it was released, but it had to have been around that same time. They also contributed to an ABBA tribute album with a cover of the song "Take a Chance on Me." And if you have a chance, you should actually look that song up because it's an amazing cover. But yeah, these guys, definitely an underrated, under the radar band that people should certainly check out.
Well, they're so underrated that Wikipedia doesn't even have their final 2 albums listed on their Wikipedia page. Like, it ends in 2009 with A New Beginning. Does not include their 2012 album The Good, the Bad, and the Undead, or the 2018 album Progressive Oi Pop.
Yeah, and I think if you look up his Wikipedia, there's even a line in it that says something like he's released the newest Rough Silk album in 2009, like almost like that was the most up to date anyone cared to type. It's really strange.
There's one line on their Wikipedia that says in 2018 the group announced a new album. That's it. That's all it says. Like, it doesn't even include the 2012 album. Doesn't even include information on the 2018 album, which obviously we didn't even know at this point. But it's they've released a ton of albums. They've got 10 full length albums. They've got the original EP Rough Silk back in 1991, and then a compilation album in 1999, Wheels of Time. But it is sometimes you wonder like what made these guys not get that next level treatment compared to some of the contemporaries that you mentioned, because they are really good. I've heard you listen to a lot of their music over the years. They've got a great sound. Don't know why they weren't a bigger deal. Again, coming out of Germany, especially because there were so many great bands coming out of Germany in the 90s that you just thought that they would have just kind of got pulled into that vortex of great music that was coming out of there. And for some reason,
or at least by association, because clearly he was working with a lot of other artists who went on to be more notable.
Yeah, it's very strange that didn't end up being a bigger deal. But definitely check their stuff out. It's really good stuff. And I haven't heard any of their new stuff, but some of their older stuff's really good. And the Mephisto album, certainly a great one. And
I feel like the newer stuff, the vocals were a little bit of a miss for me, but I mean, Jan Barnett and Thomas Ladolfi were really good singers, so it's tough to fill that void. But yeah, his entry on the German Wikipedia, like toward the end of his life, it's like on March 20th, 2009, Rough Silk's new album, A New Beginning, was released after a 6-year break. Like, awesome. It was a long time ago.
They need nothing else. Nobody else updating our Wikipedia. I don't know why, but
like some of the albums down below were updated, but not worth updating his little life paragraph.
Which I think, if I remember right, I tried to go to their website and I got an error. So that's not encouraging either.
Very strange.
But yeah, definitely check that out. A great choice for R, and maybe kind of a diamond in the rough kind of choice there, because again, there's a ton of choices you could have picked for R.
Oh yeah,
but that's kind of one that maybe people don't know about that they need to check out the catalog. Mephisto from Rough Silk, if you can find it, is definitely worth your time to check out.
And that ABBA tribute.
And the ABBA tribute, if you can find that as well. While I start talking about mine, maybe you can find exactly what that one was called, if possible. But
ABBA Metal, a tribute to ABBA, came out in 2001.
Okay.
According to Discogs, it was released in Japan.
Of course.
But yeah, had some really great stuff. Therion doing Summer Night City, Synergy doing Gimme Gimme Gimme, Advance doing Money Money Money, Morgana Le Fay doing Voulez-Vous. Let's see, a couple others. Nation doing Waterloo, Custard doing Super Trooper. Really good stuff. Better than you would imagine.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. So definitely check that out if you get a chance as well. I'm continuing through the years, and we're up to 1983. We have now crossed the after Mike years on this, so we are now into albums that have been released since Mike was born.
Sounds like some sort of alternate Gundam timeline. The years after Mike won. Journey released Frontiers.
And there were 3 albums that I kind of looked at as potential picks, so I want to highlight the other 2 before I get to my eventual choice. One was Frontiers from Journey, released in 1983. Some great stuff on that album, including Separate Ways, Send Her My Love, After the Fall, Faithfully on that A-side. and should have also included Only the Young and Ask the Lonely, which would have probably made it far and away their best album. Might still be anyway. Those two were pulled at the last minute to be on soundtracks. Only the Young was on the Vision Quest soundtrack, which is one that we probably need to talk about at some point.
Where's Chris at? He's supposed to put that in his
soundtrack
vault pick this week.
Yeah, keep that in mind for future vault picks. And Ask the Lonely was on the Two of a Kind soundtrack, but love Journey. This is a great album. Certainly could have been picked. The other one, which is probably a little off the beaten path for this podcast, but it's one of my kind of guilty pleasure favorite bands from the 80s was the Pointer Sisters. And their 1983 release, Breakout, was probably, if not certainly, their biggest album. Peaked at number 8 on the Billboard 200, released on November 1st, 1983. Just great stuff. You had Jump, you had Automatic, you had Neutron Dance. They even, in the expanded re-release of that, included I'm So Excited later on. But they've got some of my favorite pop rock songs of the 80s. Automatic's one of my all-time favorites.
I thought I'm So Excited was from Saved by the Bell.
Yeah, well, maybe from that as well. But yeah, that's definitely one that I really could have picked. But in the end, we're going to go with Huey Lewis and the News. I'm a huge fan of horn-based rock. I think that's pretty clear on this podcast. And I'm not sure there are too many bands that did it better than Huey Lewis and the News. The album they released in 1983 was Sports. Reached number 1 on the Billboard 200 in 1984 and charted for 160 weeks. It was the number 2 song on the year-end chart in 1984. And the singles, obviously, are some of their biggest songs: The Heart of Rock and Roll, Heart and Soul, which I did not know was a cover until today when I was doing research. It was actually released in 1981 by Mike Chapman and Nicky Chen.
Yeah,
that's any relation to David Chen, possibly. But
guitar virtuoso in his own right.
Yes, indeed. Shout out David Chen if you ever find this podcast. I Want a New Drug. That's the A side, along with Bad is Bad. But the B side has some great stuff as well. Walking on a Thin Line is a great one, and If This Is It is a great one. It's just these guys have such a great sound. Really, this was kind of their breakout moment. There's a great quote from Huey Lewis that was in Billboard magazines listed on their Wikipedia page. It basically talks about the goal of this album was to fill it with singles. They basically knew that if they didn't hit with this album, they probably weren't going to get another album to hit with. So they really kind of threw everything into this album to try to get singles, and they ended up with 5 of them off of this album. Just really huge. They also did a cover of Honky Tonk Blues, which was written by Hank Williams. It's on that album as well. But like I said, horn rock is some of my favorite music, and these guys would continue to make great music the rest of the 80s. But to me, this is kind of where it started for them as far as kind of taking them to that next level and making them into superstars of music. So definitely check out Huey Lewis and the News, the album Sports, released in 1983. Mike, your thoughts?
Yeah, Huey Lewis and the News are just quintessential 80s rock. I mean, if you were to make a top 5 list of artists who you'd consider to be 80s rock bands, that they would be on there. There's no question. I wasn't familiar exactly which songs of theirs were on what albums, but I knew they had enough hits that whatever album you'd pick probably had something on it. And yeah, this album's phenomenal. And to think it could have been, well, I mean, you think, in 85 they had Power of Love for Back to the Future, which, conceivably could have been written. They had so many other songs that just didn't make this album. Who knows how things could have been even beyond that.
Yeah, and their next album, which was 4, you have Jacob's Ladder, Stuck With You, Doing It All for My Baby, Hip to Be Square, I Know What I Like. Again, they just back-to-back albums where they had 6 singles off of that album after having 5 off of this one. And and of course, Power of Love wasn't even on an album. It ended up, they later added it to a greatest hits collection because it was on the soundtrack for Back to the Future. But these guys were red hot. And like Mike said, I think if you're talking pop rock, of the 80s. They're on the Mount Rushmore. They're in the top 5. If you need to explain to somebody what that era sounded like, this is a good place to start as far as a band to pick. But that is my pick for 1983. And again, it's fun looking through these year by year because we're kind of getting to the point now where so many of those one-hit and two-hit wonders of the 80s albums are being released. So it's fun to see those names come up. I saw Big Country's big album came up this week where In a Big Country was on it. That's one of my favorite songs from the 80s. But that's kind of fun too. But you also have these super albums that we're going to spotlight each and every week. And
Well, I was just looking through 1983 because that year is stacked.
Yes.
I mean, the stuff that I mean, obviously nothing against your pick because that's a huge album too, but there were so many other directions one could have gone when picking an album for 1983. I was kind of compiling a list here, but let's see.
It was a huge year.
Yeah, I mean, just absolutely nuts. Let's see, what else do we have before I start rattling these off?
And like I said, you're going to name some of these big ones that are on all these lists, but there's also some that maybe only have 2 or 3 tracks, but it might be the 2 or 3 biggest songs a band had, like came out in 83. Again, this is where we're getting into these middle 80s where there's just so many good choices each and every week, and I steered away from some of the really big, like, choices that were on a lot of the lists that I saw, but you're going to rattle off some of these that are just huge.
See, also released in 1983, we have Accept's Balls to the Wall, Billy Idol's Rebel Yell, Def Leppard's Pyromania, Dio's Holy Diver, Dawkins Breaking the Chains, Fastway, Grim Reaper See You in Hell, Kiss's Lick It Up, Merciful Fate Melissa, Metallica Kill 'Em All, Motley Crue Shout at the Devil, Ozzy Osbourne's Bark at the Moon, and Y&T's Mean Streak.
Yeah, a monster year.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's... The thing about picking one is that even with trying to pick one, I picked 3 and left out so many other great picks from 1983 that would have also been legitimate albums of the year. So it was a great year in music, and every year as we go forward, at least through the 80s and into the 90s, you're going to see something very similar where it's just dozens of albums you could pick from.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in the end, it kind of comes down to, as you talk about when you make your picks, it may come down to an album that was influential to you when you kind of started getting into
It'd
music.
be Grim Reaper See You in Hell.
That's a great one for
what
sure.
a classic band they were.
Well, no doubt about that.
All their songs talked about hell.
I love that. Before we go off the air, run down the track listing for that album, because I think that album in particular, if I remember right.
I can't remember.
Was it that album that had
See you in hell. See you in hell, my friend.
I mean, that's a great song for the record. Like,
I mean, they had All Hell Let Loose on that one, but they also had a song, Rock You to Hell, I believe.
the album as well, Rock You to Hell.
Yeah, that was just them. After Fear No Evil maybe didn't do what they needed it to do. They went back to the hell well, so to speak, and came out with a Rock You to Hell.
Yeah, that was definitely a theme there, but that's a classic for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great stuff there. Again, lots of great picks for 1983, and I'm sure there'll be also great picks for 1984, but you'll have to tune in next week to find out what direction I go with that. And with that, we are going to wrap things up for this week. Another edition of Music Weekly is in the books. It's been great to have you along with us again, especially live on Twitch. And if you're joining us on Twitch, whether it's live or on the VOD, please hit that follow button. We'd really appreciate it. Hit that heart. We really appreciate the support. It allows us to continue to do some really cool things here on Twitch each and every week. Don't forget, coming up Thursday night, we'll be back with another edition of Anime Thursdays. We're going to be talking summer season coming up. Really excited. Will we talk about the Brain Rot song on Thursday? Maybe. You'll have to tune in to find out. Really exciting stuff. Big shows coming up in the summer. Mike and I will each give you some picks that you can check out. And then, of course, we'll be back 1 week from tonight for another edition of Music Weekly with the music of June the 14th. Big thanks to Stoveleg Media for their continued support of our podcast. Big thanks to everybody who's listened or downloaded our podcast throughout the weeks. We are 72 episodes in. We are rolling along as we are closing in on both our year anniversary and 100 podcasts. And we could have done it without everybody who has helped us out and everybody who's worked on this podcast each and every week, whether it's on the air or behind the scenes. Big thanks to Rachel and Chris joining us in the chat. Big thanks to Mike for putting all this together once again. And a big thanks to you for listening to us each and every week. That'll wrap things up for this week. Until Thursday night, we'll see you then. Don't forget to join the Empire, the Nerdcast Empire.